Oh,
Hi, Patricia.
I'm going to start us off. Our participant numbers are looking great. Thank you, everybody, from joining. My name is Jennifer Warner, and a lot of my role within the City and Gales Foundation is to build impactful relationships across our communities and networks. So we have a real focus on removing barriers for individuals trying to get access into skills and getting a job. And in this case, there's a lot of challenges we found for neurodiverse people, from initially finding a job to doing the interview and then progressing on from that job. So I'm here today with Amanda Kirby from Do It Solutions to tell you about our campaign to investigate and benchmark how well employers support people with neurodiverse traits and to discover how neuro-inclusive employees feel their workplaces are. So Amanda, do you want to introduce yourself and a bit about Do It Solutions?
Sure. Thank you very much. And great to be here. And to all of you all around the world, it's really wonderful. It really is. So I'm Professor Amanda Kirby. I'm the CEO of Do It Solutions. I sort of live and breathe neurodiversity, really. I come from a neurodivergent family. I've worked in this field for 25, 30 years, run a clinical centre. And we have Do It Profiler, which is a computer-based screening tool. And we do training and all sorts of things related to neurodiversity and well-being. I'm particularly interested in education and employment. How do we get people into work and how do we make them thrive as well? So personally and professionally involved in this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So as you've all discovered the chat function already, please do feel free to pop any questions you have on there. We can get around to them at the end. We're going to leave time at the end to answer every question, hopefully, that we have. So I'm going to kick it off. So what do we know about neurodiversity in the workplace, Amanda, do you think?
Well, I think we've got a lot of headlines. So we've got a lot of headlines which say, and I'm not sure the accuracy of some of these headlines. So we've got a lot of people like super talents, superpowers. I think, so there's been great. We've got raised awareness of neurodiversity. And I've seen this. I've been working in this field for 30 years. And the last few years, I think it's been brilliant that we're having these conversations and we're talking about the workplace and going, we need to support everybody. Neurodiversity is the way we think, move, act, communicate, process information. We're all neurodiverse. Some of us diverge away from this typical norm, the average way we do things, and that's the problem. So what we're trying to do is to say we need to encourage a diversity of thought and actions and have an inclusive process. So at the moment, the data, when you drill down, and sometimes I do that because I like to drill down into the data, is that actually the accuracy of some of the data is pretty poor. And also it's about headlines. So people with neurodiversity are really good at IT, or, we need to get these people into these jobs. So there's a little bit of rhetoric going on that I think it's time for us to challenge.
Great. And I mean, in the workplace, what do we need to know? What makes those neuro-inclusive practices or inclusive practices?
So I think the first thing is we've had a lot of awareness. Well, I'm not saying we had a lot of awareness. We're starting with awareness sessions. So some larger organizations are saying this is important. Let's get it on the agenda. I think that's come along with things like increased interest in gender, different issues that have come on board. I'm thinking about intercultural ways of working and more inclusive ways. So we've got a common thought that we need to have equality, equity, diversity and inclusion. We need to do something about it. Big organizations have been saying, okay, let's start with awareness sessions. I think the challenge is in the UK, 99% in the UK, and I'm sure it's in other countries that are listening today, that many organizations are not big organizations, they're small and medium enterprises. And I think we're a long way away from thinking, how do we encourage and get recruitment right? I think a lot of this was awareness. And then we're now starting to say, well, actually, what do we do on a day-to-day basis to get people into work and to keep them in work? And I don't think we know that at the moment. And we're not doing sort of a universal design process, which is like, how do we get it right for everybody? Considering 20% of people who are going to be neurodivergent are out there. And if we want to make sure they can get through the door, how do we do that in a way that's inclusive? And I think we haven't really sorted those processes. And when we're hearing it on the ground, that's exactly what we're hearing. A lot of people who are neurodivergent saying it's really difficult to get in. But the employer, on the other hand, doesn't know who hasn't got in. So we've got that issue as well. So if you don't know who hasn't applied for the job, you don't know who hasn't sent in an application form who could be really good, or you don't know the person who's done really had challenges during their interview, well, we don't know why that was difficult for them because we're not asking those questions. So there's lots of fine-grained information we need to start really understanding what we can actually do tangibly, apart from just awareness, which awareness is a starting point, but it's not the end. It's only the beginning.
I think that's why these practices are just so important. You don't know what's dropping through the net. You don't know who you're disadvantaging.
No, and I think, you know, when we talk about neurodiversity, we go, we're all neurodiverse. I think we've got to make sure that we're not sort of going, yeah, but that's all of us. We're all a bit, you know, and I think that's an important thing to say, that some people have significant challenges which have an impact on their everyday functioning, whether it's in education or work or home, that need to be recognised and supported. And if we're an inclusive society, and that's what we've really got to be thinking about, are we really inclusive, or are we just designed education in the workplace for that bell curve with the bit in the middle for the average, and just expecting people to fit into the middle and just going, well, too bad. If you don't, that's the way it goes. And is that what we want for society? I personally don't think we do. That's why we're here. But I think that's really understanding and reflecting on that a lot of our process is being designed for efficiency in a way. We all need to do it the same way to get people through the door. We do that for exams, we do it for interviews, because we've got pack them in, get them out, mark them. But actually it does favour certain shapes and sizes, and it doesn't favour certain people who need to show their skills in a completely different way.
So to take it to a bit of a positive, have we seen anything that's working well, Amanda? Because I know there are good examples of practice.
There's great examples. So I think that's the one thing. I am an eternal optimist. I really am. And I think over the last few years, one is we're having conversations like this. So, and I think what's happening just in the last 2 or 3 years, there is a serious intent. Look at all the people coming from all over the world today. You know, that's brilliant. So there's a serious intent that we really need to do something. So that's the first thing. So there is deep interest. There's also some good organizations and businesses that are taking this really seriously and investing and putting in practice. I can think of a few like Admiral and Heathrow that are really have taken this on board, and they've got people in-house to signpost, you know, to support people. They're putting policies and practices in place. They're really thinking about their recruitment and making sure that it's inclusive. These are really good examples of what can be done. And we can keep learning from that, because we can go, okay, what did work? And look, when we get going, you know, it's like I've got a grandchild who's learning to walk at the moment, and he falls down a lot of the time, but eventually he'll walk, right? And I think we're in the same sort of process, which we will make mistakes, and we've got to go, what worked and what didn't. And we can see that. We can see some of the very specific hiring programs, maybe too specific, right? And maybe more too exclusive, rather than actually thinking, how do we make our systems more inclusive, and taking those universal design principles. But there's lots of really good practice. We need to know where it is and capture it and share it. I think that's the important thing.
Which is a beautiful segue into why this index report is an important piece of work. You did it very well there, Amanda, for me.
Thank you. So it is important. I think, you know, we need every single one of you who, if you haven't completed the index, is to do it after this, and tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. And the reason for that is where we started at the top of this, which is the data we've got at the moment is very superficial. We need to look at data for females and males, LGBTQIA. We need to look at the whole community. We need to be looking at people of different ages who've been in different sectors, who've been in work for a short period of time, for a longer period of time. We need to hear from you about what's helped and what hasn't helped, that positive stuff that we can take those strands and understand. We can only do that if we have sufficient data sets, large data sets we need to really get a nuanced understanding of what's going on. And this index is the first time where we're going to be gathering this globally. We're going out to you in America and South Africa, or Ireland, wherever you are today, please, we're asking you, because the better, the bigger the data set, the more we are going to get a fine-grained understanding. And this will be the first time to really understand this. And I think it's interesting. I'm a researcher, and I was looking at a little bit of the data just to have a look. And we've had some fantastic response, but we need more. We haven't had enough. We've had lots of females. We haven't had enough men. But we're seeing nice sections of all parts of society and all ages, which is really important. So this is the first time where we can benchmark properly what's going on and move away from the headlines to sort of fine-grained understanding. So it's really important from an employer's perspective. What are employers doing, and what are employees feeling, and what their experiences are as well? And we need both parts of that to go, where are we? And then be able to report back to you so that we can all share this information and learn from each other.
Yeah, we're really excited to be involved and just to raise awareness as to unforeseen barriers, if not even known barriers to people. So I think you've covered off why you're involved, Amanda. You're obviously so passionate about it. Is there anything else you want to say in terms of why you're partnering with us? Or
yeah, so I think it's great to partner with Sitting Guilds Foundation. I think we have the similar values, and we want to make sure that we get this information out and we help educate people to learn more about this. And that's the heart and soul of why we're involved, we feel, with you, is because we do have those same values, you know, and you're working in education, you're working in employment. So we've got the avenues to go out internationally together to try and get that data. But we need you. We need your family. We need your friends. We need everybody to tell everybody. I think the important thing that I've learned over the last 25, 30 years is that it's great to be person-centered, and we need to be, because every single person's different, and we need to have a nuanced understanding of each person, not by label, but by person, because neurodivergent traits often co-occur with, so ADHD, if we're talking about conditions, ADHD and autism and dyslexia, developmental coordination disorder, developmental language disorder, tic disorders often overlap, and they overlap with mental health conditions. And we need to understand that more, because that's important. Because I think a lot of the training over the last few years has been around mental health first aiders, which has been fantastic. But we've only got one brain. So, you know, neurodiversity is the same brain. So we need to understand about the impact of somebody in work. How does that affect them at home? How does that affect you, your mental well-being? How does that affect you in terms of retaining talent if you're an employer? Because we're talking about mental health a lot. So I'm really interested to look at some of these areas to say, okay, we can no longer think about neurodiversity over here, mental health. We can no longer think about in work. We've seen in COVID-19 this change to flexible working. Is this a good move for lots of people? Is this an important thing that we recognize, that home work-life balance? And so I'm really interested to understand that, because I like people, and it's all about understanding the people better at the heart of this, really.
And do you think, in terms of, is there practical things to make a difference from like, as you say, that individual approach and understanding people? I mean, is there practical things that an employer or an employee for their colleagues even could do to make a difference, in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think that's the good news. The good news is lots of things we can do. So one is, if we're thinking about a senior leadership buy-in, so if we get buy-in from organizations and senior leaders who have been around and maybe are neurodivergent and can stand up and say, these are my experiences. So that's something we can start to have those conversations together, which feels safe to do so. And that says, this place is a safe space for me to do so. However, we need to make sure we're doing the things, making sure policies and practices and procedures are clear. So if you are a line manager, you know where to signpost somebody, so for help and support. So knowing what's there. Just simple things like a glossary of terms. I was working with an organization a couple of days ago, and they had like an acronym jungle, you know, it really was, of all sorts of things that they kept saying, and we're going, what does that stand for? What does that mean? And then everybody in the room, so there was a big Zoom with lots of people, I was going, do you all know what those mean? And they're going, no. And how long have you been there? Years, right? So there's some really simple things that can be done, like having a glossary of terms. Really easy things you can do for recruitment. Just making sure people know how to get to you if you're doing face-to-face interviews. Those things that seem to be so minor, but actually if you put it's the pink hub on the corner and the number 22 bus comes and there's parking at the back. That's good for visitors. It's good for anybody who's arriving. It's good for interviews. So there's some really small things that can make fundamental differences. And then we have Profiler, we have Do It Profiler, which allows you to understand individuals and their strengths and challenges. And that can be used by organizations as well. So macro and micro stuff you can do both.
Great. Any tips for getting started for those that are thinking of starting on this journey?
Yep. So number one, number one is senior leadership buy-in. You have to get buy-in from the top. I think that's important because I want this to be thought of as business as usual. So this isn't about a campaign for this year. This is about something you want to do to be more neuro-inclusive, and this is going to have a lasting impact. And I think that's where senior leadership is so important, because you get that buy-in that says, actually, this is important for our organization. It's important that for our values and what we stand for. So that's number one. Two, I think awareness is useful because it gets people engaging and having a conversation. So you can start those conversations because you can start to say, actually, we're talking about this. Three, I think employee resource groups, affinity groups can be useful as long as they're not exclusive. So I think, there was one group that somebody was saying, and it was the only people who had could go in there. Right? That's not really very good, because what you want people to do is to feel more comfortable having conversations. So what stops action happening when people are worried about not knowing enough, worried about saying the wrong thing. And actually, sometimes good affinity groups can be just having a coffee and go, can I ask you some questions? And just and being able to have that free flow. I think thinking about universal design. So maybe do an anti-exercise. So the anti-exercise, how would you go about excluding as many people as possible to recruitment in your, and list that, right? So what would put people off coming to you, right? Are you doing that? And if you are, that's a good starting point to think about the things you could do to include people. So are you telling people, are you giving questions before interviews so people have got time to prepare? Often we think, well, they shouldn't have the questions beforehand because they'll know the answers. But actually, that's who you want. You want somebody who's prepared, who can think about, and if they have prepared, you want them. If they haven't prepared, then maybe you don't want them. It's not a memory game. So I think it's about having fair equity, making your job descriptions better. I've never been in a job where the job descriptions match the job, It's like, oh, that doesn't seem to, and we make it too long and we put desirables. What are desirables? Just make them essential. Either things are core or they're not, right? And try to avoid having and other stuff at the bottom that you think you better throw in just in case you need to ask them on a Friday afternoon to do something. You can go, well, it is in your job description. I think we need to just be and share your values. I think Gen Zs, I think people today actually want to know and will come to a company or an organization that's got good values, and they'll stay there because they've got good values. So I think talk about your values as well, so those are some things to get started. There's lots to do, and most of it doesn't cost much either. Somebody's asking, do you want people outside the UK to fill out survey? Yes, please.
Yes, please. Well, there's been loads of comments in the chat actually. Just have a quick check. Thanks, Suzanne, for sharing. She had a good example of what's happening in Ireland. They're using the Do It Profiler to support their group of interns. So that's really nice to hear of it working and of actual practice happening. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Suzanne's been using Profiler for quite a long time as well, actually. So thank you. Unconscious bias. Should I pick up that one? So Maria said a conscious bias is also a big problem. An NT interviewer may not have any idea why they just didn't click with an ND person, but that ends up being why the ND person doesn't get the job. I think that's a really good point, Maria. So sometimes we'll get communication clashes. And I think actually as employers or your line managers or your interviewers, we need to recognize that our communication style, ours, might be the problem. So sometimes we ask, well, I have a problem. I speak too fast, and I have to consciously slow my pace of my conversation down. I have to consciously do that. I need to remind myself. The other thing is I have got terrible auditory memory. You ask me 3 questions in a row I will not be able to remember all of them. Okay, that doesn't mean I'm not capable of answering them, but I can't remember them. So it's also your bias, because what you think in an interview is you've asked, could you tell me about this and this and this, and they can't remember it, and then they ask you, could you repeat that? And what you do is you go, could you tell me about this and this and this, and you do the same thing again. They go, sorry, could you repeat it again? Now, your bias might say, well, gosh, they obviously don't know because they had to repeat it 3 times. They may have the best answer, but they just needed single questions. So I think it's really important that we recognize our own biases in terms of our own communication style, and it might be different. Recognizing that when somebody's looking at their fingers and they're feeling very anxious, this is a interview situation. It's incredibly anxious making, it really is. Perhaps they've had 2 or 3 interviews before that have gone really badly, and this is important. Well, I would feel pretty anxious and pretty sweaty in those situations. So just be mindful, and that conversation with somebody that makes them feel comfortable. Try to avoid questions like, if you were on the moon, if you were an animal, what would you be? Please don't ask those sort of questions, right? Or if you were doing this, what could you do? Because often people who have never been in those experiences will not be able to answer it. So avoid some of those questions that are leading somebody down a pathway that they are going to find it difficult to showcase their actual skills. And I think the other thing is sometimes we're testing things that are not part of the job. So in an interview, you might think, well, that person's really spending ages answering a question. So there's real pauses. You think, well, God, they don't know. But actually, maybe they're just taking longer to process information. Your bias might think they don't know, but actually they do know, and they're trying to formulate the right answer. Maybe they've got a stammer or an internal stammer inside, so they're taking longer to process it. So just check your biases. I had one organization the other day was throwing out all the CVs of anybody with a spelling error, right? And they thought there was nothing wrong with that. So just check that your view, if somebody's looking away, that maybe they're looking to think and they can't, and they're overwhelmed with a bank of people and they need to look up. I do that sometimes, close your eyes, you look up, look away when you're really thinking. So just check your biases. I think we need to keep doing that ourselves, So good point, Maria.
Thank you. And everyone should fill out the profiler, not just those who present as neurodivergent. Absolutely, Cami, thank you for picking that up. It is for, in inverted commas, neurotypicals as well as anyone with neurodiverse traits. I think it's to really get a true picture as an employer or as a colleague, and it's just really important that anyone and everyone. The other thing to say about the survey is it is completely anonymized, so it's completely anonymous. We're not asking for any personal information as part of the survey because we want it to be that way. We want as true a picture and everyone to feel really comfortable in telling their truth.
I think that's really important, and we've put in some free text. We've limited free text because just to make it accessible. The site is as accessible as we can to complete it. But we want that rich information, so where people, and I can see people are telling their stories, and I think that's really important. It's going to give us that more as a nuanced understanding of what's really going on. Should I take another question?
Please do.
Okay, so I'm finding that businesses are advertising they are neurodiverse proactive, which is great, but they're not training the managers, they don't offer the support needed. It appears that businesses are jumping on the bandwagon, but really not making the changes and teaching from the ground up for those who need it. The HR teams try their best, but end up battling the managers, and it just affects us. So I think you're right, Sybil. I think this is the stage we're at. I can see a sort of life cycle process. I'm in fact doing more training now, starting to do more training with managers than I was probably a little while ago, because they've done awareness, they're HR, EDI, L&D leads, and so they've got there, and now they're recognizing that managers need the training. And I think that's important. What I think is important when you're doing manager training is not to have a course on autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, developmental language disorder, but more around communication, understanding about planning, organization, and time management. I've just written a newsletter about being, actually you're feck it, so it's called being feckful, actually. So feckful, not feckless, but feckful.
Yeah,
And
there's a difference.
Yeah, there is a difference. So, and there is a word called feckful, actually, which I tend to use. So really thinking about, manager thinking about the person's feelings, their executive functioning, that's the E, the planning, organization, and time management, communication, so how do we communicate, and then being kind, because you want to feel psychologically safe to have the conversations. And I think manager training around being feckful is a really useful approach, because the problem being when we go into diagnostic silos is sometimes then people think, oh, I know a bit about this, and then you start spotting everybody. Oh, I think you might be a bit dyslexic, or you might be and the challenge is that all of these things overlap. So that's one big thing. And not everybody can gain a diagnosis, and a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing in a sense. So it's much better that we do some principles of how to support everybody, and then talk to individuals about what their specific needs are. And I think that really makes a difference. So manager training is important, because managers don't need to know about diabetes or asthma, or, you know, they're not diagnosticians. So let's not go down that. Let's think about common issues and executive functioning, planning, organization, time management, well-being, and your feelings, your emotions are the ones that are coming up all the time.
Yeah, and there's some comments about that, actually. Thanks for sharing, guys. Like, it's making sure companies kind of that are talking the talk, walk the walk, and kind of people feeling that only true change will come when, you know, either through the recruitment industry getting involved, and management properly training up people to be having these knowledge and skills.
So I mean, I think, you know, somebody just asked, is there a survey link? Not just, this isn't just for people who are neurodivergent. It is for, we want people who are not neurodivergent as well. So if you know family and friends and colleagues, and you are or you're not, we want as big a sample as possible, because it's really useful to have a comparison between people who are or not, people who've got a diagnosis, people who don't, people who've been diagnosed in adulthood and not in childhood, what the difference is for you. Because I think that might be different in terms of, we're asking about whether you're disclosing, or I hate that word, whether you're sharing information with your employer or not, and what the response has been when you've done that. Has it been good or not? Have you got help and support or not? So we want a real cross-section of people who are neurodivergent, people who are part of the neurodiverse population of the world as much as possible. And then we've got a separate survey for employers, people in C-suite, HR, EDI, L&D, to talk about your organization's experiences as well. So we want both. We want everything. So we've got lots of data. We can come back and give you some answers. Really, you know.
Yeah. Important. There's some questions actually put in the question box there, Amanda.
Oh,
I don't know if you've seen them.
No, I haven't. Fine.
So it might be good.
My ADHD multitasking.
That's okay. We have time to cover them, so that's why I was just making sure we got them in.
Thank you. It'd be really interesting to have an anonymous poll of attendees and see how many are considered themselves to be neurotypical. I worry that we're often preaching to the, you know, I think you're right. Why do people come along? I know people here today, some people who are neurodiverse, some people, I don't know all of you here, but do you know, we've got to start somewhere. Why am I interested? Well, I've got personal reasons why I got interested in this. I was a GP and hadn't had much training about neurodevelopmental conditions or neurodiversity 30 plus years ago. And my son was diagnosed with dyspraxia when he was like 3. Would I be interested? Maybe, but I'm very interested because I've got children and grandchildren. So why am I interested? So I think, why not get people who are interested and motivated to talk and to push it out? That's often where changes comes from, you know, where people are motivated to do that. So you're right, but each of you, if you are neurodivergent and you've got a choir to preach to, so go off and preach to your choir. Tell 5 people to tell 5 people to tell 5 people, you know, I mean, so we can do that. Don't, you know, I was a doctor in Cardiff, right? That's all I am, who got interested in this book for a reason. So we've all got the ability to amplify our voices. We really do. What advice would you give someone who is neurodivergent, has expressed this to managers and the team, but no reasonable adjustments are given when expressed the need for this? Right. So you've got a couple of things there. One is carrot or stick. So you can go back to, it depends on the size of the organization. And if you've got an HR or department, you can go to the HR department and ask for help and say, I need this to do my job. You can ask to see if they can give you access to work. I'm not sure, anonymous attendee, if you're in the UK or outside the UK. You can ask, and if you're in the UK, there's access to work. In the UK, we have the Equality Act 2010. I said carrot or stick because in my experience, sadly, and I asked quite a lot of people recently about this, what's your experience if you've had to go to tribunal? And it's not good. And a lot of people say it really impacts on their mental health. It impacts on your relationship with your managers. And really, in some ways, if you're not getting help and support, and that is continuing to happen, and you've gone to HR and you've tried to do that, it comes a point where it might be, this place might not be the best place for you. And I think sometimes we have to just recognize that if that change isn't going to happen, and I'm not sure, tribunals are there and we're getting more people going to tribunal, but actually the relationship with your employer and the challenge that is for you to go through that, I'm not sure it's a great experience, even though that might be the right one and you might get, but it's a really painful experience. So I would say try to go to the other powers and then see, but if not, think about moving if you can. I know that's not possible always. Amanda, what does success look like for you in the next 5 years when it comes to better including neurodivergent people in society and organizations? Obviously, so much has happened over the last few years. So just wondering, right.
If you could wave a magic wand.
Wave a magic wand.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. What do I wish? I wish, I know this is an unrealistic wish, okay, but as I said, I wish that we don't need to do this anymore. That our inclusive processes are such that we have equity in the approach to recruitment and retention, and every individual who's neurodivergent has got the opportunity to thrive in a way that works best for them, and we take a person-centered approach. And that's whether you are you've got dyslexia, or you're a female parent with 3 children and you need to work flexibly where possible. Now, I am a pragmatist as well, because obviously some jobs you can't be a fire officer or a policeman from home, so there are limits in terms of what we can do. But the more that we think about, and there is the test of what is a reasonable adjustment. Reasonable adjustment is in the context of the organization and the size of the organization and what you're doing. So understanding that. But I think we could do a lot in neuro-inclusive processes. We could really improve recruitment. We really can do that. And technology can help, but we've got to be really careful, because technology can also not help if we're not careful. So we've got things like applicant tracking systems that exclude people who don't put the right keywords in, and we know that we've seen gender bias in some of the IT systems. So we need to make sure that when we're trying to do good, we don't inadvertently do harm. And I think that's where seeing the index, hopefully we'll repeat this again, we'll see trends and changes, and that virtuous circle of feeding back what we've learned hopefully should move the dial quicker. So that's what I'm hoping, that the information we can provide, that you're providing and others are providing, will mean we're a community that we can learn together. And I think that's important. I really believe we need to share, not hide what works, because I think sometimes it's like people are guarded and go, I don't want to give my secrets away. Give your secrets away, give them away, because there's plenty of people working, it's a bit like it's an industry. And I think we've got to be careful that it doesn't become too industrialized and we lose the sense of you're trying to support people who are all coming from different parts of lives and countries. So we need to keep checking our own biases and give stuff out. I'm a great believer, give stuff out.
Yeah. Well, that leaves us just enough time now to just thanks again, Amanda, for today. It's been great to partner with you in this research and this important area for us. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to put up a quick poll, if that's okay, just for you to partake with. And yes, we will be sharing this conversation and helping you share it. And hopefully we'll get more people taking our survey. It only takes 10 minutes. If you can please pass it on to your colleagues, friends, networks, everyone to get involved. And it's for every size of organization, whether you employ 5 or 500 people. Sorry, Amanda, do you want to say something there?
No, just exactly what you're saying, which is please just tell people 10 or 15 minutes, you can really make a difference. It's a pain to fill in a survey, but just do. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people. Well, we really need thousands to make it really powerful. So please do.
Yeah. And I think people are taking that poll first, which is great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we will talk to you soon. Please spread our message and get involved. We hope to see lots of credentials and everyone taking our pledges and all of that. So thanks again.